Good morning. I want to thank everyone at the Adir Challenge for affording me the opportunity to speak to you. I want to thank Muriel, who truly is a force to be reckoned with, and I've enjoyed getting the opportunity to know her. I think it's fair to say that the status quo of our society is fundamentally failing the Jewish community. And now more than ever, we need disruptors and innovators who are willing to challenge the status quo, who are willing to stand up to anti-Semitism. People often ask me, Richie, you're not Jewish. Why do you insist on standing up and speaking out against anti-Semitism? And I simply reply that one need not be Jewish to combat anti-Semitism, just like one need not be Black to combat anti-Black racism. No one would have ever asked Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, why are you marching with Dr. Martin Luther King? You're not Black. We have this sense that we're all in this together. Throughout history, there have been Jews who gave their lives for the cause of civil rights. 60 years ago, Andrew Goodman and Michael Schwerner, as well as James Chaney, were barbarically murdered in the Mississippi burning so that Black people like me could have the right to vote and live freely, unencumbered by the cruelty of Jim Crow. And so the lesson learned from history is that we're all in this together. We all have an obligation to fight hate and extremism, no matter what form it takes and no matter what direction from which it comes. When I went to Israel for the first time and visited Yad Vashem, I remember a quote that has since lodged in the back of my mind. And it reads, first, they came for the socialist. And I said nothing because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionist. And I said nothing because I was not a trade unionist. And then they came for the Jews. And I said nothing because I was not a Jew. And finally, they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. Right? Those words drive home the message that we are all in this together, and that we all have an obligation, a moral obligation, to combat extremism and anti-Semitism. When I'm reflecting on October 7th, which is the deadliest day for Jews since the Holocaust, I'm reminded of the words of Associate Justice Robert Jackson, who was the chief prosecutor in the Nuremberg trials. And in his opening statement, he said, the crimes which we seek to condemn and punish are so calculated, so malignant, so devastating, that we cannot tolerate their being ignored because we cannot survive their being repeated. Those same words must be spoken about October 7th. Israel cannot tolerate October 7th being ignored because the world's only Jewish state cannot survive it being repeated. October 7th was a crime against humanity so barbaric that it cannot be ignored and it cannot go unpunished. The perpetrators of October 7th, like Sinwar, must be brought to justice, and Hamas must be removed from power. And Israel has a right to defend itself against Hamas in the wake of October 7th. Just like the United States had a right to defend itself against al-Qaeda in the wake of 9/11. For me, this is not about geopolitics. This is about human decency. I often tell people, imagine speaking to an Israeli mother who lost her child on October 7th. I cannot imagine anything more cruel and callous than telling that mother, you had it coming. You and your people brought it upon yourself. It is indecent to blame the victims of terrorism rather than the terrorists themselves. It is indecent to glorify the terrorism of Hamas as quote unquote resistance. It is indecent to tear down images of the hostages and to promote images of the paragliders who gunned down innocent young Israelis. And above all, it is indecent to be silent and indifferent in the face of anti-Semitism. I'm reminded of the words of Dr. King, who said that history will record that the greatest tragedy is not the strident clamor of the bad people, but it's the appalling silence of the good people. In the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. Elie Wiesel once said that the opposite of love is not hate, it is indifference. And for me, the single greatest challenge in our society is the silence and indifference and cowardice from so-called leaders in our society, from college and university presidents, from politicians. The UN Woman, which is the women's rights arm of the United Nations, went nearly 2 months without uttering a word, without condemning the sexual atrocities that Hamas perpetrated against Israelis. This is not only about the Jewish community, and this is not only about Israel. This is about the future of our country and our civilization. If we as a civilization cannot condemn with moral clarity the cold-blooded murder of children and civilians, then we must ask ourselves, what are we becoming as a society? What does that reveal about the depth of anti-Semitism in the American soul? October 7th has been an awakening for the Jewish community, but it must be a reckoning for both Jews and non-Jews. We all have a duty to confront the deepening rot of anti-Semitism on social media platforms, on college campuses, and even in the halls of the United States Congress. When I'm speaking to the next generation of Jewish leaders, I often tell them, be the Maccabees of the modern world. The Maccabees were fighting for the right of Jews to exist as Jews in the face of an existential threat, which at the time was Antiochus IV under the Seleucid Empire. Today, the Jewish community is fighting for the right of Israel to exist as a Jewish state in the face of an existential threat. Not only Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis, but the Islamic Republic of Iran, which is the root of all evil in the Middle East. And so my advice is, be the Maccabees of the modern world. Never be in the closet or never be ashamed of your Judaism and Zionism. Be proud of your Judaism. Be proud of your Zionism. Live not in fear, but live in freedom. Because where there is fear, there can never be freedom. And remember that the Jewish people are among the most resilient that humanity has ever known. It was a point that was driven home to me when I went to Israel for the first time since October 7th. I went to the scene of the Nova Music Festival massacre, and I met with one of the producers named Ophir. And he had a level of suffering that most of us will never know. He suffered multiple gun wounds on October 7th. He lost hundreds of his friends because the Nova Music Festival was a closely knit community. And despite everything he had suffered, he nonetheless was smiling because he was hopeful about the future of the Jewish people and the Jewish state. And he was wearing a tag that read, "We will dance again," which beautifully captures the resilience of the Jewish people. So I leave knowing that the music of the Jewish people and the Jewish state will never end, and that Israel will dance again. And we're counting on the next generation of Jews to keep playing that music so that all of us can keep dancing. And please know that you have in me an ally who will never waver in the fight against anti-Semitism. So with that said, I have the honor of announcing the first winner of the Adir ID competition from Track A, Tisby Hershot, a high school student from SAR High School in the Bronx, which I proudly represent. Tisby's ideas focus on promoting the physical and virtual security of Jewish communities worldwide, presenting innovative and thorough solutions. His proposal stands out and has the potential to serve as the basis for multiple competitions. Well done. Thank you for reflecting so well on the Bronx and SAR and on the Jewish community writ large.